front or toward the back.
Right. So you have a large incision toward the back of your hip.
Well, it's not large. It's about 5 inches. It's not too bad.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
All right. It is not yet 9 o'clock. It's a good parsha today. It's not story, but it's still a good parsha. I like story personally, as Asher Chaim knows well, and I think Richard also knows well. I like story.
For decades, I used to stand up and say, "This is one of my favorite parshas."
Yeah.
It is great.
Like
I gave a lecture
parshas.
a number of years ago on this, on the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year, about what the world might be like if we followed these rules.
Right? Maybe I should let you do the shiur today.
No, please.
You've got a lecture all prepared.
No, I'd have to pull it out of the computer. It's been a while.
Okay, all right. Okay, it is 9 o'clock. Alan, would you like to take us out with the bracha over Torah study? Yes, you. Moi, yes, you. If you'd like to, I think you can. Let me ask you to unmute.
I thought I had learned my lesson not to speak anymore, but I'll try.
No, that is not the lesson I want you to ever learn, ever. Otherwise, I would never, ever speak. If I made a mistake and then I didn't speak, I would just like be quiet all the time.
All right, where's the bracha?
I have to see it in front of me.
It's the traditional one, and then it's la'asok b'divrei Torah, b'kiddushanu b'mitzvotav.
Okay.
I don't think we have a slide. Evie, do we have a slide for the bracha? It would be nice if people saw it.
Let me check.
Look at Neva to the rescue with the Siddur.
Very helpful.
That's good.
Well, I'll try it.
I know you've been out of yeshiva for a while, but it's just,
but you can't take the yeshiva out of the.
No.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen. Beautiful and perfect. Thank you. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Good morning. Let me just see everybody on gallery. Lots of people are here. Some people I see the little box moving, and other people are still, but I assume listening. Hi, David. I haven't seen you in a while. Good morning, Elliot. Shabbat shalom. Daniel, great to see you. Steve, Bonnie, Erica. Hi, Erica. James Moshe, lovely to see you. Paul's here. Shabbat shalom, everybody. All right, hi, Jill. I hope to hear from everybody, or as many people as possible. And this week, it's a double parsha, Bahar B'chukotai. And we're going to look at a bunch of different things that I hope are all going to come together. But we're really going to focus on, through some different issues, who is God in all this? So we're going to look a little bit at the idea of Shemitah, a little bit at the idea of, which is a sabbatical year, a little bit at the idea of Yovel, the Jubilee. But what I want to know is, who is God in all this and who are we in all this? So that's my ultimate question. And I'm going to screen share and just jump right in. I'm going to do a bunch of texts as usual, and then open up for discussion and questions. And the chat is open. Just know that I'm unlikely to look at the chat because there's too much to focus on between the texts and all of you. So if there's something you really want me to know, then tell me, okay? Okay, so let's see if I can just share my screen. Looks promising. Okay, so here's the rather cryptic name of the session, which I hope will make sense once we get to the middle of things, Whisperings to a Divine Stranger. And I'm going to start a little bit at the beginning, which is Genesis 1, just very briefly as an introduction. So as you all know, God sort of enters time and space and creates the universe. And then there's this really profound, I think, and I think many of us understand at this stage of our lives, I mean, just as an adult, how profound it is that God completed the world and then rested. So, Vayara Elohim kol asher asah v'hinei tov ma'od v'yihi erev v'yihi boker yom hashishi, and God saw all that God had made and found very good. So I love that evaluation, right? It's like, how often do we look at something, not good enough, not good enough, and it's so hard to rest if you feel something is not good enough, right? You need that sense of, it's good, or it's very good. We're not going to parse this text, just for those of you who are getting ready to parse the text. We're not going to do that. I'm just, again, doing this as an introduction to God and who God is. Okay, then chapter 2, the heaven and all and the earth were finished and all their array. And on the seventh day, God finished the work that God had been doing. And God finished on the seventh day from all the work that God had done. Vayivarech Elohim et Yom HaShvi'i v'yikadesh oto ki vo Shabbat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim lasot. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because on it God ceased from all the work of creation that God had done. So just think about, God's role here. God creates the world. God even creates human beings in chapter 1, verse 26 and 27, I think it is. And then we'll further meet human beings in the Garden of Eden, which is coming up in this chapter. But here, at least, God is really a solo operator, right? God creates, God sees, God evaluates, God rests. Shabbat is not yet a social institution, right? So this is about God and God's work and God's project. And if you think about it for a moment, I don't know about all of you, but when I'm completely in charge of something, whether in the social sphere or the professional sphere, it can be a little lonely. And it's not always easy to partner with somebody. So that's what I want to consider about God. And we think often, one of the tropes about the quote unquote Old Testament is that God is an angry God. Which I think actually is much more complicated than that. I mean, there's so many images of God, and some of them are nurturing, and some of them are maternal, and some of them are angry and punishing. I mean, God can be really violent. But, if we think about why might God be angry? And I think, and if we look closely at the angry passages, we'll see it's really hard for God to partner with human beings. Right? Human beings are woefully inadequate, at least in the Torah, if not overall, right? So, compared to the allness, the magnificence, the power of God, how does the sort of task for God is to partner with human beings who can be so, they're just small, right? Compared to the all-powerful. So we'll get into that a little bit more as we go down. So we look through these texts. Okay, so then in Genesis 2, God says, and it's good, it's interesting. Adonai Elohim lo tov heyot hadam levado. So Lord God said, it is not good for human beings to be alone, or for the human to be alone. Adam is really, if we dove into those texts about Adam and Chava and the Isha and the Ish, Adam itself is sort of a gender neutral term. So it's not good for the human being to be alone, I think is a good translation here. I will make a fitting helper for them. Or really one kenegdo, like one that matches, like opposite them, one that matches them. So God, the first not good thing in the Torah is aloneness. That's the first not good thing. And let's see what Rashi says about that. I shall make a helpmeet for Adam, for the first human being, in order that people may not say that there are two deities, or shtei rashuyot, two realms. So, so we shouldn't say that God is God up in the heavens and the Adam is God down on earth. So that we should not say the Holy One, blessed be He, is the only one among the celestial beings without a mate. And this one down here, Adam, is the only one among the terrestrial beings without a mate. So there's something about being solitary that makes you godlike. And God wants to avoid that impression. We should not think that Adam, who does not have a mate, right, is God. So God made a mate for Adam. I hope that's clear. Okay, so that's all by way of introduction. I'm sure you want to say things about that, but let's hold off as we dive into our parsha. So now we're entering the realm of Shemitah, or the sabbatical. Okay, can I have a Hebrew reader and an English reader? So raise your hand, and Evie, if you can, unmute somebody. Evie will ask you to unmute once you've raised your hand, which I know you will, to read in either English or Hebrew. I can't see people because I'm looking. Ah, Neva. Okay, I just, I'm trying to ask Neva to unmute.
Okay.
There we go.
So, וידבר אדוני אל משה בהר סיני לאמור.
So not only a beautiful Hebrew, but an Israeli accent. I love it. Thank you, Neva.
דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, כי תבואו אל הארץ אשר אני נותן לכם, ושבת הארץ שבת לאדוני.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second. So we saw earlier that 7, and I didn't say this earlier, but I should have. 7 is a sacred number, and 7 is the number of completion, rest, holiness. And so now God is saying, when you enter the land that I assigned to you, the land shall observe a Sabbath of the Lord. So now, now we see that the earth itself is in partnership, so to speak, with God. Okay, go on.
6 שנים תזרע שדך, ו6 שנים תזמור כרמך, ואספת את תבואתה. ובשנה השביעית, שבת שבתון יהיה לארץ, שבת לאדוני, שדה לא תזרע, וכרמך לא תזמור.
Okay, so let's just read that in English. When you enter the land that I assigned to you, the Lord shall observe a Sabbath of the Lord. 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in the yield. But in the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, a Sabbath of the Lord. Okay, wait, you shall not, I'm sorry, I didn't finish that verse. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. Okay, so I think we're up to here.
את ספיח קצירך לא תקצור, ואת ענבי נזירך לא תבצור, שנת שבתון יהיה לארץ.
So you shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your untrimmed vines. It shall be a year of complete rest for the land.
והייתה שבת הארץ לכם, לאוכלה לך ולעבדך ולאמתך ולשכירך ולתושבך הגרים עמך.
Nice.
ולבהמתך ולחיה אשר בארצך תהיה כל תבואתה לאכול.
Okay, so it shall be a year of complete rest for the land, but you may eat whatever the land during its Sabbath will produce. You, your male and female slaves, the hired and bound laborers who live with you, and your cattle and the beasts in your land may eat all its yield. So that's interesting. There's something about the sabbatical, and if you think about it, Shabbat as well, that is sort of leveling the playing field, right? So together, you, your male and female slaves, the hired and bound laborers, your cattle and your beasts may eat all its yield. So it ends with this sense of unity. And, if you think about Shabbat, it's also a moment where we put our sort of differentness aside to rest, right? We're not like, I'm a lawyer, you're a doctor, you're a surgeon, you're a rabbi. Like, Shabbat, like there's something that connects us all, which is just this act of rest from creation. Okay, so one more text about this, and then we're going to dive deeper into who God is in all this. So the Alshich, who's interesting, because he makes this point in different ways about staka, about philanthropy as well, or about giving. When you come into the land, implies no conquest, but the acquisition of a legacy. This may foster the illusion that the land belongs to Israel permanently and unconditionally, to be inherited by their children, to be tilled and cultivated, and to reap the fruits of their sweat and toil. To counter any such notion, God says, the land which I give to you is not a land given as an irreversible inheritance, but a pledge renewed on condition that you merit it. However, if you turn away from me, I shall take it away from you and give it to others. So there's something about Shemitah, the sabbatical of the land, and the Jubilee, which reminds us that the land doesn't belong to us, that the land ultimately belongs to God. And that really, that we are sort of residents on this earth, right? We're not owners. God's the only owner. So, all right, let me stop the share here and see if anyone wants to say anything about any of this. I'm opening things up.
Feel free to raise your hand using the Zoom button.
And if not, I'm happy to go on. Yes, Jill. Shabbat Shalom, Jill.
Okay, now I can unmute myself. Great. So yeah, just at the very beginning when you were talking about, God being God alone, and that's why it was so important for Adam to have a partner to distinguish between God and us. And then I thought about it kind of coming full circle on Shabbat when we welcome in the Shabbat bride. So it's, so I feel like by the time Shabbat comes around, even God isn't lonely, that we have this wedding with,
Nice,
God.
beautiful. And we'll see as we go through the text that there's something about the mitzvot, which are designed exactly to relieve our loneliness and God's loneliness. But yes, what you said about the Shabbat bride, that's right on. Thank you. Okay, so James Moshe.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Great to see everybody. I was really touched by, of course, by something I've read 1,000 times, but maybe now today understand a different way. Thank you. Which is the idea that, Adam was alone.
Yeah.
And that's something unique, that human beings, one of the things that makes us unique is we have the greatest capability for connection on a conscious level through conversation, etc. But we also have this great capability to isolate ourselves. And during the pandemic, I really felt that, especially as a single person. My daughter couldn't come over and see me. And I really felt like Adam, I need something, I need somebody. And so thanks for providing that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. A friend of mine called me near the beginning of the pandemic, and she lives alone. She said the loneliness is crushing me, and I said to her, my family's crushing me. Right? It can go in either direction. But what I really want to make is a more serious point, that sometimes we're completely alone and lonely, and sometimes we're completely with a million other people and profoundly lonely. Right? So the loneliness can come up in either kind of context. Not to minimize at all that being alone has its own special sort of quality, like not being with other people has its own special quality, painful quality. Yeah, Paul.
There we go. Shabbat Shalom, Boker Tov, everyone. James, good to see you. But picking up about this aloneness, I probably missed a few words when you were saying, Rabbi Dan, about a person being alone can make them godlike. And that is very heavy to me, because I know I've experienced many times in my life where I'm alone, where I find myself getting into trouble because I assume that I have more power beyond my own mortal being. So I'm wondering what further references in Torah or in Talmud Mishnah there are about this issue.
So Paul, that's so interesting. So like we get into our own sort of distortions in our own heads when we're not corrected by contact with the universe.
Yeah.
I think the point that Rashi was making was a little bit different, which was, since God's essential nature is to be one and unique, we could have mistaken human beings for gods if they were also alone.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're saying you mistake yourself for God when you're alone.
Well, as a human being, I feel that I feel probably any human being could face that danger.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I have to think about what other texts might speak to that. I can't think of any offhand.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
If I do think of some, I will let you know.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
All right, I see like a lot of hands now, and I promise you, I have this text that you're going to love, so I really want to get there. So I'm going to spend exactly 5 more minutes, and we might have to end early today. I'm not sure yet. So I'm going
Yes,
to
9:50.
So we have to end early. So I'm gonna ask you all, as a special favor to the group and to me, to be as concise as you can. Okay, so I'm gonna spend 5 minutes. Go, Richard.
Very briefly, I thank you. In your brief look at Genesis, you translated helpmate. That's the traditional construction of the description of Eve, as basically using terms of equality, as someone like Adam. That's a profound shift.
It's a profound shift.
And a very important one for which I thank you. That's it. It's very meaningful to me, and I think hopefully for all of us.
I think it does have the implication of full partnership, but yeah, yes, and not our topic, but we agree, profound. Okay, Jay.
In thinking about the Rashi, it occurs to me in this notion of who are we, who is God, that what is the first mitzvah? Pru. So God has ceded maybe one of the most powerful roles of procreation, of replication, to us, which is kind of interesting in light of the Rashi, because if it's really like, well, no, don't equate us with God. God's given us maybe one of the most powerful roles that he or she could. So just want to make that observation.
Yeah, and one could say the entire Torah, and this goes back to Paul's point as well, is God sort of correcting us when we mistake our powers, our divine powers, and that we have certain divine powers, right? We ate from the tree of knowledge, and yet we can't eat from the tree of life, right? So it's like, what are our powers and what are God's powers? And keeping those straight is very important to the Torah, especially in the first 11 chapters of Genesis, but I think going forward as well. Okay, Mark.
Good morning, good Shabbos. So I collect Sidurim, and this is the Sidur Shahar Zahav from San Francisco. I was browsing through it this morning, and then of course some people said some things. So I want to read a brief blessing from the Sidur called For Being Single, right? O God and God of all people, as first you created one human being, female and male in your image, so do I stand before you now, complete and whole. Fully engaged with your world, I open myself to you, as did Miriam, for whom Torah names no spouse, who served you all the days of her life, wholly fulfilled. I come before you alone like Elijah, who has traveled with our people since ancient times, blessing and watching over us. I am blessed and holy, sanctified and beloved. I am a singular witness and a reflecting mirror of your eternal oneness.
Oh, I love that. Who's the author, does it say?
It's probably it's listed. It's not listed right there.
Okay, that's gorgeous. And true, I think Miriam and maybe Serach Bat Asher are the only single women in the Torah. And if there are others and I'm not remembering them right now, let me know. I think Lori had her hand up, but I don't see her. Lori? There you are. Okay, we have exactly 1 minute. So if you could take 30 seconds and we'll give 30 seconds to Nehemiah, that would be great. Nehemiah, sorry.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to speak to land and love and God. And some people know I speak up because I lost a brother to heroin and a mother to schizophrenia. So I had to spend my childhood praying to God, and love was my prayer to God. And when I came to Romemu, it was, can I trust people to love me and come out of the shame and the stigma? And so I'm learning now that love is the space between you and me. And how can I communicate my emotions and have God be there between us? Because that for me is the ultimate intimacy with God, with my body as sacred earth, and with you as my sacred holy family.
Beautiful, Lori. Thank you. Wow, you said a lot. Thank you. And I think the text that we're going to look at is going to expand on what you said. Thank you. Nehemiah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, you also can see me now. Okay, so I want to support, I forgot the name, the person who spoke maybe before Lori. Mark. Yes, in our tradition, there's a lot about being alone, but we in Romemu naturally, by our nature, where we are at, and where the community needs, focus on the community. It's fine. But in order to reach the highest state, most people that I know of had to go through a period of what started from loneliness, which is dangerous for us when our mind is going to different places. But when we go beyond it, we go to the aloneness and aloneness. And that's what the Luria did. He left his wife for a while, not for a few weeks, and then come back. And most of the time he was by himself. And that's what Moses did for 40 years in the desert, according to tradition, before he came to the Jewish. And that was every realized being that I know of, either was in a small community of people who are very secluded inside, like the master, or the Baal Shem Tov in the forest and so on. So I think we have to balance and to know that we have to be in community now, but sometimes we might have to be alone for a period of time in silence to hear the small still voice that Elijah heard.
Thank you, Nehemiah. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move into Yovel, the concept of Yovel, Jubilee year. I think I'm going to read this in English just in the interest of time. And we're going to look at a Hasidic text about this. So first of all, I love this piece of the Torah. All about the Yovel, but it's also, it's God reassuring the anxieties of the people around the instruction of the Jubilee. So, and should you ask, oh, I'm sorry, wait a second. No, I'm sorry. This is specifically about the Shemitah, I'm sorry, about the sabbatical. And should you ask, what are we to eat in the 7th year if we may neither sow nor gather in our crops? So here we have the instruction or the command of, we don't work the land in the 7th year. So what are we going to eat? What's going to happen? What do you mean? How am I supposed to do this? What are you requiring of me? So God says, so God, first of all, anticipates the anxiety, right? In verse 20, and then says, I will ordain my blessing for you in the 6th year so that it shall yield a crop sufficient for 3 years. So God, whether it happened this way or not, who knows? But God here is assuring us that it will be possible. You will have enough to eat. Don't worry about your food anxieties and food insecurity, because it's going to be okay. When you sow in the 8th year, you shall be eating all grain of that crop and you'll be eating the old until the 9th year, until its crops come in. So in the 7th year, you eat what you already gathered from the 6th year. And so also in the 8th year, I'm sorry, the 7th year, the 8th year, until the crops come in the 9th year. But the land must not be sold beyond reclaim. This is where we move into the concept of Jubilee. For the land is mine. Ki li haaretz. You are but strangers resident with me. Such an interesting phrase. Ki gerim v'toshavim atem imadi. So you are strangers and residents with me, or strangers and residents with me. Throughout the land that you hold, you must provide for the redemption of the land. So in the Jubilee year, all slaves are set free, number one, and all land revert to their ancestral holdings. Okay, so to speak, the land is set free in that year. All right, so now I want to look at the Degel Machane Ephraim, who I believe was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, but I tell you the truth, I'm not sure. So if anyone has any information about the Degel Machane Ephraim, please put it in the chat. Thank you. All right, so what does the Degel Machane say? It is possible to speak about this in the manner of allusion or remez, right? As a hint, like what's going on here. And so what the Degel Machane, to go back a little bit, is doing, so if you look at this verse, Ki gerim v'toshavim atem imadi. So you are strangers and residents, you are with me. And what the Degel Machane is saying is that you are strangers and residents like me. I am also a stranger, right? And I'm giving you an instruction about how to live that renders you a stranger like me. So you will be a stranger with me, imadi. You will stand as strangers with me. I will explain it according to what I have heard from a certain wise person regarding the verse, I am only a stranger in the land. So this is a psalm in the mouth of King David, who says, Ger anochi ba'aretz al taster mimeni mitzvotecha. I am only a stranger in the land. Do not hide your commandments from me. So what in the world is the connection between mitzvot and being a stranger, and King David feeling like a stranger? And what is King David asking of God? This is known from the quality of the nature of the world. A stranger is without people to cleave to. So the word lidbok, I guess, to cleave to is all over that psalm. So it's interesting he's picking it up here. And it's a profoundly spiritual term, which is most often used for cleaving with God, right? It's also used in the book of Ruth for Ruth cleaving to Naomi. They are without one to be close to and to tell all their happenings, all the events that happen to them, and all their heart to, since they have no friend, neither Jew nor Gentile. So they have no friends in the world. But when the stranger sees a friend, then they tell all of these to their friend, all their happenings. So the stranger is lonely, desperate for a friend, finally sees a friend and is able to tell their friend everything that's going on with them, tell their friend their story. And know that the Holy One, blessed He, the Holy Blessed One is she, is themselves, like a stranger in the world. For they have no one with whom to imbue their presence and their glory. May they be blessed. And we are infinitesimally, I didn't pronounce that quite right, small. So what's going on here? God is alone in God's world, or a stranger in God's world. Or stranger actually is like a stranger in this world, because God can't share God's self, because God's presence and God's glory is so big and we are so small, and God is struggling to share God's self with us, because that's a challenge. It's a challenge for God, who's so big and so all powerful and infinite, to share who God is with us. And this is what King David, peace be upon him, prayed. I am a stranger in this land. Back to that verse that we talked about in the beginning of this text. That is to say, I too do not want to be resident in this world. I am only like a stranger in this world. So I'm not an owner in this world. I'm not a settler in this world. I'm a stranger in this world. And therefore, do not hide from me your mitzvot, like a stranger who tells all their heart to their friend. And this is that which can be said about the allusion in the verse. For you are resident strangers, that you are in the aspect of a stranger in this world and in that of a resident in the world to come. So when are we going to be full residents, full inhabitants of the world? In the world to come. Then you are with me, for I also am a stranger in this world, as explained above. And obviously, I will not hide from them my mitzvot, as explained above, and sorry, I cut it off here. And understand. That's, I don't know. There's something about the very end of the translation, which is weird. So I think what's going on here, but maybe was not fully spelled out, is that mitzvot themselves are the way that we connect to God and tell God all our sort of happenings and the way God befriends us, right? And God shares some of God's self with us. That's like the bridge between heaven and earth. I'm going to show you one more text and then I will open it up to conversation. So it's too bad we have to end early. There's so much to do here, but it's okay. You can all have the source sheet and look at it yourself. So Heschel says, the destiny of I tried to degenderize it. The destiny of humans is to be a partner of God. And a mitzvah is an act in which humans are present, an act of participation. While sin, Heschel says, is an act in which God is alone, an act of an alienation. So in other words, when we sin, or when we abandon God, that's our sinning. Which is this really interesting definition of a mitzvah and a sin. And you should know that at least in Aramaic, although I don't think in Hebrew, the word mitzvah relates to the Aramaic word saftah, meaning to attach or join. Also, I guess it's, and maybe Nehemiah can help me with this, it's related to the word sevet, right, for staff?
Yeah, it's also modern Hebrew.
Oh, thank you, Evie, thank you. So it can mean companionship, personal attachment. A mitzvah bundles up the person who's commanded and the commander, creating a relationship and essential bond. Okay, so now I'm going to stop the share. I said a lot. And we'll use, I think, the next 10 minutes to talk. Okay. If anyone has anything to say, otherwise I have more text to share with you. Only people who have not spoken yet. Okay, Daniel.
Shabbos, it's such a heavy kind of theme that you're bringing to us this morning. Who is the divine, who is God, and who are we? And something that I'm very aware of as a contemporary Jewish spiritual seeker is that the two names for the divine that we have in our tradition, Yud-He Vav-He and Elohim, those names are actually quite misunderstood or not really known by myself or by many contemporary Jews. And I think earlier you said that the essence of the divine is this quality of oneness and uniqueness, which would be more Yud-He Vav-He, the unity, the oneness. But then there's Elohim, which is kind of the many are one, because it's Elohim, which gets us into holy multiplicity, that we live in a world of separation, and that's holy, just as Yud-He Vav-He, the oneness, the unity, which includes the concealed multiplicity, is also holy. And we have a fractal of all of that within us. We are the mirror of both Yud-He Vav-He Elohim, which is actually a unity in itself. If you look carefully in Genesis chapter 2, Yud-He Vav-He Elohim appears 20 times. The Torah wants us to know this is one name. Yud-He Vav-He Elohim is one name, for unity and multiplicity, and that is within us. So the shift is, how do we find and connect to that essence in us, so that the parts of us that feel separate, the parts of us that are so alone, feel connected to the essence of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh Elohim within us. That it's, if we do a psycho-spiritual dive into this, then we see that we have an essence, but we also have parts that feel disconnected from our essence, from our innermost self. So it gets a little complicated because there is this multiplicity
Yeah. So
within
Daniel,
us and in the world.
saying is that we're also unique, and we also have that multiplicity within, and we have all those aspects of God within. We reflect, we express those.
Right. We have all the qualities of what we associate with divinity: compassion, awareness, presence, but we also have
about rage, destructiveness, depression.
Right. And so how do we partner with, how do we come into relationship with all of those pieces, internally and externally? I think it's a really complicated conversation.
Yeah, I think it is. And I'm going to move on, Daniel, but one question I have in response to that is, befriending all those pieces inside, does that relieve us of our loneliness? I'm not going to ask you to answer that help.
Okay.
Okay, Margot, and then Shosh. My friend Shosh, Shabbat Shalom. Margot. You're not, okay, here. That should do it.
Okay, thank you. Shabbat Shalom. I love the combination of the Heschel, where our bridge to God is the mitzvah, and this Aramaic tzavata, meaning connection, companionship, or personal attachment, because I think that's where God is. It's in the relationship, the attachment. That's where it's activated. It not only relieves loneliness, but it helps make the world a better place. And the truth is that we don't honor the mitzvot of Shemitah. We don't leave the land open for the stranger. We don't leave it open for the beasts of the field to eat what they don't. And it's gotten us into deep trouble. So I think always looking for these connections between ourselves and the earth will help us to connect more with God and with each other, with one another.
And perhaps save our planet. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Margot. Okay, Shosh and Barbara.
Oh.
There you go.
Hi, am I unmuted? I'll be brief. It's a bit noisy here. Yesterday, or 2 days ago, I posted on Facebook a quote from a bat mitzvah girl who said, genuinely, what are God's pronouns? And I just posted on Facebook, and it's turning into like a living page of Talmud. It is so rich. I want to recommend people go there, and I'm just going to summarize. Some people who are like really progressive are like using verse 127 as proof text that God is they. And they're like, that is the truth, like no question. And there's so many things. Someone said I, thou, which I love. It's like how we address God. It's making the pronouns that we all talk about so full of life. And of course, the conversation is all about us in relationship to something we can't even know, and we can't ask God their pronouns. So I just used they, them for the first time, I think. So it's amazing, the conversation about God's pronouns on my page.
Thank you. Right.
Yeah.
And the question is often, how can we most fully, or as fully as possible, conceive of God so that we can stand most fully in God's image? Okay, Barbara.
Shabbat Shalom. Hi, everyone. We talked about this on Tuesday in the class, the Shemitah year, the Jubilee year. And the thing that I just keep thinking about is the giving of the land back and what that means, and how can that happen, because nobody owns the land. So who are you giving the land back to? And of course I couldn't help but think about Israel and the settlements and, 50 years of that. Is it, who had the land 50 years ago, but who had the land 50 years before that? And I'm sure that goes on and on in conversations. And I just, that's to me, it's a confusing conversation. You think about the Native Americans who say that nobody owns land. And yet here we are in the most, in our capitalist society where everyone owns, everything. And so I'm trying to figure out a metaphor or a parallel or some way to address that and to think about that.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts about that. Thank you, Barbara. One is I was listening to the contemporary author George Saunders talking about how we each have our little victory narrative, and we measure up or we don't measure up, but that really the world is so much bigger than that. And I think what these mitzvot remind us is that the world is so much bigger than ownership and differentiation and slave master. And what are the mitzvot, in which we can stand that connects us to one another, as opposed to living in the sort of differences that I guess capitalist society or any society really raises up. So yeah, those are profound questions. Thank you. David. Good to see you, David. I haven't seen you.
Good to see you too. I know it's been a long time. Shabbat shalom. Getting back to what someone said, it's always been more helpful to me to think of God as a verb, actually. But I live in a world where I have to carve out my alone space. I'm a composer, and I find my moments of holiness or my moments of connection with God in that space, and I can only find that space when I'm alone. And it's an interesting thing because I collaborate sometimes too, and that's a very, very different experience. But there's something about creation and aloneness, timelessness. I mean, God lives in a place without time, I believe, and and we live in a place of time, which is what this is all about. Shemitah, Shabbat, everything's about. So there's a lot there. I just thought I'd throw it into the mix.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a great question. How do we connect to God when we're alone? And how do we connect to God when we're with others? And when do we most feel and experience that connection? So I'm going to end with one text because we only have 4 minutes left. I'm going to share my screen again. But I appreciate, it's almost like there are different learners, right? You have to sort of, as an educator, sort of adjust to every student's learning style. We also have to, adjust to one another's and our own spiritual styles. So there's a beautiful, later on in the chapter, there's this little passage about what will happen. Sorry, there are sirens outside. What will happen if we listen, right? And if we listen, God will establish. This really actually illustrates the Degel Machaneh beautifully. God will establish God's abode in our midst. And I will not spurn you, right? I'm not going to abandon you. I'm going to live amongst you. I will be ever present in your midst. So I will be ever present in your midst. I will be your God, and you shall be my people. I, the Lord, am your God, who brought you out from the land of Egypt to be their slaves. No more, who broke the bars of your yoke and made you walk erect. So that's a beautiful identity statement for God, right? So God will live with us, and God is the one who liberates us, basically. But I want to point to is one word here, v'hitalachti, which is a reflexive verb. And the last time it was used, at least for God, is in the Garden of Eden, right? So God is walking, I think walking, in the Garden of Eden. This is after Adam and Chava ate from the fruit of the tree. And there's just a sense of presence and intimacy and sort of casual strolling there. So Rashi picks up on this and says, I will as it were, walk with you in the Garden of Eden. So if you listen to all this, I'm going to be with you, as it were, in the Garden of Eden, as though I were one of yourselves, weird construction, but whatever, and you will not be frightened of me. So that's really interesting, right? So, v'lo tiyu mizda'zim mimeni, yachol lo tir'u mimeni. You might think that this implies you will not have awe of me. Scripture, however, states, but I will be your God. So in other words, what's happening here is Rashi's trying to work out this sense of intimacy and distance. So if you listen to all my mitzvot, you'll have a tremendous sense of my presence and this intimacy. And yet you'll understand, Vahayiti lachem lelohim, and I will be for you a God. So even though there's this intimacy and connection, there's also that sense that you are still God, va'atem tihiu li la'am, and you will be for me a nation. So that sense of belonging and, almost like that intimacy of lovers, and yet still that awe for the divine. So I wanted to end with that, since we're here defining who God is, defining who we are, and defining that connection. And may we all be blessed and merit that sense of intimacy and presence, especially in our loneliest moments. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.